He looked at her with cold, dead eyes and said, "You're an anchor, Riley, and I'm trying to sail." In that moment, Tom didn't just break her heart, he shattered her entire reality. He left her in a freezing apartment with $40 to her name, convinced he was upgrading to a life of luxury with another woman. But fate has a wicked sense of humor. What Tom didn't know, what neither of them knew, was that a signature was already drying on a document in Geneva. A document that declared his discarded wife the sole heir to the Harrington estate, a property empire worth $1.3 billion. This is the story of the most expensive mistake a man ever made. The heating vent in the tiny apartment on East 4th Street rattled like a dying lung, coughing out lukewarm air that smelled faintly of burnt dust. Riley pulled her cardigan tighter around herself, checking the oven timer. The chicken was small, the smallest one the grocery store had, but she had seasoned it with the last of the rosemary and lemon. It was their 5th anniversary. 5 years. Half a decade of grinding poverty, of Tom's failed startups, of Riley double-shifting at the diner just to keep the lights on. But tonight felt different. Tom had been distant for months, hiding his phone screen, coming home late, smelling of expensive cologne that she certainly hadn't bought him. Riley, in her naive optimism, told herself he was working extra hours to surprise her. At 7:15 p.m., the lock tumbled. Riley straightened her dress. It was an old blue thing she'd worn on their first date, slightly frayed at the hem. She smiled as the door opened. "Happy anniversary, T." The words died in her throat. Tom didn't have flowers. He didn't have a bottle of wine. He had 2 large suitcases, and they were already sitting in the hallway behind him. He wasn't taking off his coat. He stood there looking at the small table set for 2, the candles flickering against the peeling beige wallpaper, and he actually grimaced. A look of pure, unadulterated pity mixed with disgust. "We need to talk," Tom said. His voice was flat, professional, like he was firing an employee he didn't particularly like. "Tom, what are the bags for?" Riley's hand started to tremble. She reached out to touch his arm, but he took a half step back. "I'm leaving, Riley. I filed the papers this morning. They'll be served to you tomorrow, but I wanted to do this somewhat decently." "Leaving." Riley laughed, a jagged, confused sound. "For a business trip, Tom, the chicken is— I'm leaving you." He snapped his patience, fraying instantly. "Us. This." He gestured around the cramped living room with a wave of his hand that encompassed the cheap furniture, the drafty window, and Riley herself. "I can't do this anymore. I can't live like a rat. We're a team," Riley whispered, tears instantly blurring her vision. "We're building something. You said the tech consultancy was going to take off next month." "There is no consultancy, Riley," Tom shouted. The veneer of calm cracked. "I haven't worked on that dead-end project in 6 months. I've been working at Thorne and Associates, real estate, high-end development." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a phone, a new model, sleek and expensive. He tapped the screen and held it up. The wallpaper was a photo of him and a woman. She was blonde, sharp-featured, wearing a white blazer that probably cost more than Riley's annual rent. They were on a boat. "That's Jessica," Tom said, his voice softening, not with affection for Riley, but with reverence for the woman in the photo. "She's the VP of operations. We connect. She understands ambition. She understands where I'm going." Riley felt the blood drain from her face. "You're leaving me for your boss. I'm leaving you because you're an anchor, Riley, and I'm trying to sail." The cruelty of the line hung in the air. "Look at you. You're happy with coupons and leftovers. You have no drive, no vision. Jessica is— she's elite, and I belong in that world." He reached into his wallet and pulled out $300. He tossed the bills onto the dinner plate, right next to the rosemary chicken. "That should cover your rent for the week. I'm taking the car. It's in my name." "Tom, please," Riley sobbed, finally breaking. She fell to her knees, grabbing the hem of his coat. It was pathetic, she knew, but she couldn't help it. She loved him. She had sacrificed everything for him. "Don't do this. We can fix it." He looked down at her. For a second, she saw a flicker of hesitation, not guilt, but annoyance. He peeled her fingers off his coat, as if she were something sticky and unclean. "Don't make this harder than it is. You're a good girl, Riley, but you're a nobody. You'll always be a nobody. I need a someone." He turned, grabbed the handles of his suitcases, and walked out. He didn't look back. The door clicked shut, sealing the silence. Riley sat on the floor for hours. The candles burned down to nothing. The chicken went cold. The $300 sat on the plate, greasy from where they touched the food. She was 27 years old. She had $42 in her bank account, and the love of her life had just bought his freedom with 3 Benjamins. 3 weeks later, the nobody was living in the Bluebird Motel on the edge of the industrial district. Tom hadn't been lying about the papers. The divorce was fast and brutal. Because they had no assets to split and no children, the state processed it with terrifying speed. Tom had the better lawyer paid, for Riley assumed by the illustrious Jessica Thorne, who argued that since the apartment lease was in Tom's name, Riley had 48 hours to vacate. She had sold her wedding ring at a pawn shop on 6th Avenue. The broker, a man with grease under his fingernails named Sal, had looked at the tiny diamond chip under a loop and sighed. $70, he'd grunted. It cost $500. Riley had argued, her voice cracking. "Market's down, sweetheart. Take it or leave it." She took it. Now she was in room 304. It smelled of stale cigarette smoke and bleach. Her entire life was packed into 2 cardboard boxes and a duffel bag in the corner. She had kept her job at the diner, the Greasy Spoon, but her hours were cut. Her boss, a gruff man named Mike, told her she was too gloomy for the morning rush. "Customers want a smile with their coffee, Riley," he'd said. "You look like you're at a funeral." Every night, against her better judgment, she checked social media. Tom didn't block her. Why would he? He wanted an audience. There he was on Instagram. Tom_Miller_real estate. Closing deals in Cabo with my love. #power couple. #hustle. #new life. The photo showed Tom and Jessica clinking champagne glasses on a yacht. Jessica looked effortless, her hand resting possessively on Tom's chest. Tom looked tan fit and happier than Riley had ever seen him. He was wearing a suit that fit him perfectly. Riley lay on the lumpy motel mattress, the glow of the phone illuminating her tear-streaked face. She zoomed in on Jessica's wrist. A bracelet. Cartier. "He never bought me a birthday present," she whispered to the empty room. The lowest moment came on a Tuesday. Riley was walking back to the motel from the bus stop in the pouring rain. Her umbrella had inverted in the wind, useless. A black Mercedes SUV splashed through a puddle, soaking her from the waist down in freezing, oily grit. She stopped wiping the mud from her eyes and looked at the license plate as the car sped away. It was a custom plate T and J-EST, Tom and Jessica Estate. It was probably a coincidence. It had to be, but it felt like the universe was personally mocking her. She dropped her grocery bag. A jar of generic peanut butter shattered on the pavement. Riley sank down onto the curb, the rain plastering her hair to her skull. She didn't cry. She was past crying. She felt a cold, hard numbness settling in her chest. She was alone. She was poor. She was nothing. "He was right," she said, her voice hollow. "I am a nobody." She gathered the shards of glass, because she couldn't leave a mess. She was poor, not inconsiderate, and walked the rest of the way to the motel. When she got to the front desk to get her key, the magnetic strip kept demagnetizing the clerk. A teenager with headphones around his neck flagged her down. "Hey, Riley Jenkins." "Yes." She shivered. "Guy was here looking for you. Weird guy. Suit, British accent maybe, or just fancy." Riley's heart skipped a beat. Tom, no. Tom wasn't British. "What did he want?" "Didn't say. Left this." The clerk slid a thick, creamy envelope across the counter. It wasn't standard mail. The paper was heavy-textured, almost like fabric. There was no stamp. Just her name, Riley Jenkins, handwritten in impeccable calligraphy in black ink. Riley took it. It felt heavy. "Did he leave a name?" "Yeah, Sterling, Arthur Sterling. Said it was urgent, like life or death urgent." Riley took the envelope to room 304. She sat on the edge of the bed, dripping water onto the cheap carpet. She turned the envelope over. On the back there was a wax seal, real red wax, stamped with a crest she didn't recognize. A lion holding a key. She broke the seal. Inside was a single letter on the same thick stationery, and a plane ticket. A first-class ticket to New York City, departing tomorrow morning at 8 a.m. She unfolded the letter. "Dear Mrs. Jenkins, I represent the estate of the late Silas Harrington. You do not know me, and you likely do not remember Mr. Harrington, as you were separated from his lineage at birth due to unfortunate family circumstances. However, Mr. Harrington has passed. A DNA test conducted from medical records you provided for your appendix surgery in 2018 flagged a match in our private registry. We have been looking for you for 6 months. Your ex-husband has left you in a precarious position. I know this because I make it my business to know the beneficiaries of the Harrington Trust. Please board the flight enclosed. A driver will meet you at JFK. Do not tell anyone where you are going. The vultures are already circling, and they do not know the heir has been found. Sincerely, Arthur Sterling, Esquire. Sterling and Blackwood Attorneys at Law." Riley reread the letter 3 times. Silas Harrington. The name sounded vaguely familiar, like a historical figure from a textbook, or perhaps a name she'd seen on the side of a skyscraper downtown. She looked at the plane ticket. First class. She looked at her muddy shoes. She looked at the shattered peanut butter jar in the trash. Tom had called her an anchor. He had called her a nobody. Riley stood up. She went to the sink and washed the mud off her face. She looked in the cracked mirror. Her eyes were red, her skin pale, but for the first time in weeks the fear was gone, replaced by something else. Curiosity, and a tiny flickering spark of rage. She packed her bag. The flight was a blur of hot towels and champagne that Riley was too nervous to drink. When she landed at JFK, she kept waiting for someone to tap her on the shoulder and tell her it was a mistake, a prank show or a cruel mix-up. But there was a man waiting at baggage claim. He held a tablet with the name Ms. S. Jenkins. He was dressed in a suit that cost more than Tom's entire wardrobe. "Mrs. Jenkins?" he asked. His voice was deep, gravelly. "I'm Winston. Mr. Sterling sent me." "It's just Riley," she stammered, clutching the strap of her battered duffel bag. "And I don't have any other luggage." Winston didn't blink. He simply nodded and took the bag from her hand. "Right this way, Mum." He led her not to a taxi, but to a black Maybach, parked right at the curb, engine idling. The interior smelled of rich leather. As they merged onto the expressway toward Manhattan, Riley pressed her face against the cool glass. The skyline of New York City rose like a jagged jaw of steel and glass. "Where are we going?" she asked. 57th Street, ma'am, the Spire. Riley gasped. Everyone knew the Spire. It was one of the tallest residential buildings in the Western Hemisphere, a needle-thin skyscraper overlooking Central Park, where billionaires bought penthouses they only visited once a year. The car pulled up to the private entrance. Doormen in grey coats rushed to open the door. They didn't look at her worn-out sneakers or her frizzy hair. They looked at her with disciplined deference. She was ushered into a private elevator that moved so smoothly she didn't realize they were ascending until her ears popped. The doors slid open on the 80th floor. The office was vast. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a view of the entire city, a sprawling grid of lights beginning to twinkle in the twilight. In the center of the room sat a massive mahogany desk. Behind it sat Arthur Sterling. He was an older man, perhaps in his 60s, with silver hair swept back and spectacles perched on a sharp nose. He looked like a hawk, watchful, intelligent, and dangerous. "Riley," he said, standing up. He didn't offer a handshake. He gestured to a leather chair. "Thank you for coming on such short notice. Please sit." Riley sat. She felt small. "Mr. Sterling," the letter said. "My grandfather." Silas Harrington Sterling corrected. Yes, he was a difficult man, a titan of industry, real estate shipping technology. He disowned your mother 30 years ago when she married a jazz musician instead of the banker he had chosen for her. She changed her name, moved away, and buried her past. She died when you were 6, correct? Yes, Riley whispered. Car accident. Silas monitored you from afar, Sterling said, pacing to the window. He was too proud to reach out, too stubborn to admit he was wrong. But he kept tabs. When he was diagnosed with terminal cancer last year, he had a change of heart. He rewrote his will. Sterling turned to face her, his eyes locking onto hers. He left everything to you, Riley. The board of directors is furious. His other distant relatives, cousins, nephews you've never met are preparing lawsuits. They expected the empire to be divided among them. Instead, it goes to the granddaughter who waits tables at a diner. Riley felt dizzy. Everything. What does that mean? A house. Some stocks. Sterling pressed a button on his desk. A heavy-bound document slid out of a hidden drawer. He placed it in front of her. Not a house, Riley. The house, and the hotels. The commercial plazas in Chicago, London, and Tokyo. The Harrington Group controls 20% of the luxury rental market in this city alone. He leaned in. The net valuation of the assets after taxes is approximately $1.3 billion. The room went silent. The only sound was the blood rushing in Riley's ears. I can't, she stammered. I don't know how to run a company. I can't even pay my electric bill, Mr. Sterling. My husband left me because I'm a nobody. Your husband is a fool, Sterling said sharply. And you won't run the company alone. You have me. You have a team. But you are the majority shareholder. You have the veto power. You own the ground beneath their feet. He paused, his expression softening slightly. But you must decide now. If you sign this, you inherit the money, the power, and the targets on your back. If you walk away, I will give you a check for $5 million, and the rest goes to the board. You can disappear. Live a comfortable life. Riley looked at the pen. She thought of Tom. She thought of the T&J-EST license plate. She thought of Jessica's Cartier bracelet. She thought of the rosemary chicken going cold on the table. You're an anchor, Riley. She picked up the pen. Riley's hand shook as the nib of the fountain pen touched the paper. The ink flowed dark and permanent. Riley Jenkins. Ideally, Sterling said, taking the document back and blowing on the ink. We should change that back to Riley Harrington. It carries more weight, and it distances you from the man who discarded you. Do it, Riley said. Her voice surprised her. It was stronger than before. I want my mother's name. Excellent. Sterling tapped an intercom on his desk. Winston, bring in the files on the subsidiaries. He turned back to Riley. Now the fun part. You need to understand what you actually own. It's not just buildings. It's influence. Sterling opened a large portfolio. He began flipping through glossy brochures of skyscrapers and development projects. This is the Harrington Tower in Dubai. This is the new eco-resort in the Maldives. And this, he pointed to a rendering of a massive, futuristic complex. This is the Aurora project. It's a mixed-use development in Seattle. It's currently our biggest contract. Riley squinted at the brochure. At the bottom, in the fine print, listing the contracting partners, she saw a logo. Thorne and Associates. Her breath hitched. Thorne and Associates. Who are they? Sterling waved a hand dismissively. A mid-level development firm we contract with for West Coast operations. They handle the grunt work permits, local zoning, basic construction management. We pay them a fee, they do the legwork. They are entirely dependent on the Harrington contract to stay solvent. Riley felt a cold smile tugging at the corner of her mouth. It was a sensation she hadn't felt in years. So, she said slowly, the Harrington Group, my company, employs Thorne and Associates. Essentially, yes, we are their primary client. If we pulled the Aurora contract, they would likely go bankrupt within the quarter. Riley leaned back in the leather chair. The dizziness was gone. The fear was evaporating, replaced by a surge of adrenaline that felt like lightning in her veins. Mr. Sterling, she said, does Thorne and Associates have a VP of operations? A woman named Jessica? Sterling raised an eyebrow. He typed something into his computer. Jessica. Yes. Jessica Vane, recently promoted. She's the lead liaison for the Aurora project. Why? And she works with a man named Tom Miller. Sterling squinted at the screen. Thomas Miller, hired 6 months ago. Junior project manager. Looks like he was brought on by Ms. Vane personally. It's noted here in the HR audit as a relationship of interest. Riley laughed. It wasn't a happy laugh, but it was a powerful one. Tom Miller is my ex-husband, she said, and Jessica is the woman he left me for. He told me he was leaving me to join the elite. He told me I was an anchor. Sterling stared at her for a long moment. Then a slow, predatory smile spread across his face. He closed the laptop. Well, Mrs. Harrington, Sterling said softly, it appears the anchor has just bought the boat. What happens now? Riley asked. Now, we announce your succession, but we do it carefully. We have a gala coming up, the Harrington Annual Charity Ball. It's in 2 weeks here in New York. Everyone who is anyone in real estate will be there. The board, the partners, and the contractors. Will Thorne and Associates be there? They wouldn't miss it. They are desperate to impress the new leadership, though they don't know who that is yet. Rumors are flying that the heir is a recluse or a foreigner. They will be there to schmooze. I want to go, Riley said. But not as Riley Jenkins, not as the waitress. No, Sterling agreed. He stood up and walked to a side door. He opened it, revealing a walk-in closet filled with racks of clothing boxes of shoes and a vanity mirror. For the next 2 weeks you are in boot camp. We will teach you how to walk, how to talk, and how to negotiate. We will erase the last 5 years of poverty from your posture. You will undergo a complete makeover. When you walk into that ballroom, Tom Miller won't just regret leaving you. He won't even be able to breathe the same air as you without your permission. Riley stood up. She walked to the window and looked down at the city lights. Somewhere out there, Tom was probably popping another bottle of champagne, with Jessica toasting to his new life, completely unaware that the ground beneath him was about to open up. "Let's get to work," Riley said. The next 14 days were a blur of agony and education. Riley moved into the penthouse at the Spire, but she didn't have time to enjoy the thread count of the sheets or the view of the Hudson River. Sterling hired a consultant named Dominique, a French woman with eyes like ice picks, and a bob cut so sharp it looked like it could sever a limb. Dominique was not there to be Riley's friend. She was there to chisel a CEO out of a waitress. Posture. Dominique would bark, tapping Riley between the shoulder blades with a riding crop. "You walk like you are apologizing to the floor. You are a Harrington. You own the floor. Chin up." The mornings were physical. Personal trainers, dermatologists, and hairstylists descended on the penthouse. They stripped away the frizzy, dull hair, treating it with oils and keratin until it fell in a sleek obsidian curtain down her back. They fixed her skin, manicured her nails, and whitened her teeth. But the afternoons were harder. That was when Sterling took over. He sat her down in the library with stacks of binders. "This is the board of directors," he said, slapping down a file with photos of 12 intimidating men and women. "Memorize their faces, their weaknesses, and their secrets. This man, Roger Banks. He's skimming off the construction budget in Chicago. We're letting him do it until we need leverage. This woman, Martha Leroy. She hates the Thorn contract. She's your ally, but she's ambitious." Riley studied until her eyes burned. She learned to read a balance sheet. She learned the difference between EBITDA and net income. She learned the history of the company her grandfather built. "Why did he leave it to me?" she asked Sterling one night over a dinner of grilled salmon, no more rosemary chicken. "He didn't even know me." "He knew you survived," Sterling said, swirling his Pinot Noir. "He knew you had grit. The other heirs, they are soft. They've never been hungry. You know what it's like to have $40 to your name. That makes you dangerous, Riley. That makes you careful." By the 10th day, the change was internal. Riley stopped flinching when people entered the room. Her voice dropped an octave, losing its hesitant, high-pitched, customer service tone and settling into a calm, authoritative alto. On the final day before the gala, Dominique brought in the wardrobe. Racks of gowns from Paris, Milan, and London. But Riley walked past the sequins and the tulle. She stopped at a dress in the back. It was red. A deep blood-red silk that looked like liquid fire. It was backless with a plunging neckline and a slit that went up to the mid-thigh. It was aggressive. It was bold. "That is a statement," Dominique warned. "It is not a debutante dress. It is a matriarch dress." Riley ran her fingers over the silk. She thought of the beige cardigan she had worn the night Tom left. She thought of the mud on her diner uniform. "I'm not a debutante," Riley said, her eyes flashing in the mirror. "I'm the boss." She turned to Sterling. "I want to wear the Harrington emeralds." Sterling choked on his water. "The emeralds?" "They haven't been taken out of the vault since your grandmother died in 1985. They are worth $20 million alone." "Then they'll match the dress," Riley said coolly. "Have security bring them up." Sterling stared at her. Then he grinned. "Yes, ma'am." The grand ballroom of the Plaza Hotel was not merely a room. It was a breathing ecosystem of wealth, power, and calculated ambition. Underneath the cascading light of massive crystal chandeliers, the air was thick with the scent of expensive French perfume, old money, and the sharp metallic tang of anxiety. This was the Harrington Annual Charity Ball, the crown jewel of the New York real estate social calendar. But tonight, the usual gossip about mergers and summer homes in the Hamptons was absent. Tonight the air vibrated with a singular burning question that sat on 500 tongues. Where is the air near the towering champagne fountain constructed of baccarat crystal? Tom Miller adjusted his silk bow tie for the 10th time. His palms were sweating inside the pockets of his tuxedo trousers. Beside him, Jessica Vane stood like a statue, carved from ice and ambition. She wore a silver sheath dress that shimmered like mercury, designed to draw every eye in the room, but her own eyes were restless, darting around the ballroom like a predator scanning the horizon. "Relax, Tom," Jessica hissed, bringing her flute of champagne to her lips. She didn't look at him when she spoke. She was too busy assessing the board of directors across the room. "You're twitching. It makes you look weak. And tonight we need to look indispensable." "There are rumors, Jess," Tom whispered, leaning in close so the nearby waiters wouldn't hear. "People are saying the new owner is going to clean house. If they look too closely at the Aurora contract, if they see the discrepancies—" "They won't." Jessica cut him off, her voice sharp and dismissive. "I have the numbers buried so deep in subcontractor fees that it would take a forensic accountant a year to find them. Besides, I have a private meeting scheduled with Arthur Sterling later tonight. I'll charm the new heir, whoever he is. It's probably some 20-year-old trust fund brat who just wants to party in Ibiza. We'll be running the company for him within 6 months." "I hope so," Tom exhaled, trying to force his heart rate down. He looked around the room, taking in the gold leaf molding and the velvet drapes. "God, I love this life. Can you believe it? Jess? A month ago, I was eating leftovers in a drafty studio apartment on 4th Street. Now I'm drinking vintage Dom Perignon at the Plaza." Jessica smirked, a cold expression that didn't reach her eyes. She squeezed his arm, her nails digging in slightly. "You upgraded, Tom. You trimmed the fat. You left the anchor behind, and now you're floating. Just remember who gave you the life jacket." Before Tom could answer, the lights in the massive ballroom dimmed. The murmur of 500 conversations died out, instantly replaced by a heavy, expectant silence. A single brilliant spotlight cut through the darkness, illuminating the top of the grand, sweeping staircase. Arthur Sterling stepped into the light. He stood at the microphone, looking every inch the gatekeeper of a dynasty. "Ladies and gentlemen," his voice boomed, echoing off the vaulted ceiling. "Distinguished guests, partners and friends, thank you for joining us. It has been a year of transition and sorrow for the Harrington Group. But tonight we look to the future. Tonight, the speculation ends." Tom leaned forward, squinting into the light. "Here we go," he breathed. "It is my distinct honor." Sterling paused, letting the tension stretch until it was nearly unbearable. "To introduce you to the chairwoman, the sole beneficiary, and the majority shareholder of the Harrington estate." "Chairwoman," Jessica whispered, her brow furrowing. "Please welcome," Sterling announced with a tone of fierce pride, "Mrs. Riley Harrington." The double mahogany doors at the top of the stairs swung open with a theatrical flair. A collective gasp ripped through the room. It wasn't just a sound of surprise, it was the sound of air being sucked out of the room. Riley stood there. She was not the woman Tom had left, crying on the floor. She was a vision of vengeance wrapped in silk. She wore a gown of deep blood-red silk that clung to her body like liquid fire, backless, and daring with a slit that rose dangerously high on her thigh. It was a dress that didn't just ask for attention, it commanded submission. But it was the jewels that made the room freeze. Around her neck rested the Harrington Emerald's legendary stones, the size of quail eggs, glowing with a deep radioactive green that matched the fire in her eyes. They hadn't been seen in public for 30 years. She didn't smile. Her face was a mask of cold, imperious beauty, her makeup flawless, Her hair swept back to reveal the sharp, elegant line of her jaw. She looked down at the crowd of New York's elite as if they were insects she was deciding whether or not to crush. "Oh my God!" A woman standing near Tom whispered, her hand flying to her mouth. "Is that—" Tom dropped his champagne glass. The sound of the crystal shattering on the marble floor was like a gunshot in the silent room. Shards of glass and expensive wine exploded over his patent leather shoes. But he didn't flinch. He couldn't feel his feet. He couldn't breathe. His brain was misfiring, trying to reconcile two impossible realities. "No." He wheezed the word, scraping out of a dry throat. That's impossible." Jessica stared at the woman on the stairs, her eyes narrowing. "Who is that? Why does she look familiar?" "That's Riley." Tom choked out his voice, trembling with a mixture of horror and disbelief. "That's my wife." Jessica whipped her head around her face, draining of all color until she looked like a corpse. "Your ex-wife, the waitress." "The nobody you told me about, the one with the coupons." Riley began to descend the stairs. She didn't walk, she glided. Every step was calculated a masterclass in posture and power that she had spent 2 weeks perfecting in agony. The crowd parted for her, instinctively creating a wide berth, like the Red Sea parting for Moses. She didn't look left. She didn't look right. She walked with a terrifying singular focus toward the center of the room, where the board of directors waited nervously. But as she passed the champagne fountain, she stopped. Slowly, deliberately, she turned her head, her eyes dark and glittering under the lights locked onto Tom's. The room went deathly silent. Everyone was watching. They saw the broken glass at Tom's feet. They saw the terror on his face. They saw the recognition in the eyes of the billionaire heiress. She took 2 steps toward him. The scent of her perfume, a custom blend of jasmine, amber, and something sharp like ozone, wafted over him, drowning out the smell of the spilled champagne. "Hello, Tom," she said. Her voice was smooth, rich, and amplified by the perfect acoustics of the ballroom. It wasn't the pleading voice he remembered. It was the voice of a queen addressing a peasant. "Enjoying the party?" "Riley." Tom stuttered. He felt like he was naked in front of 500 people. You look expensive," she finished for him, arching a perfectly sculpted eyebrow. A small, cruel smile played on her lips. "I believe the last time we spoke, you said you wanted to sail, Tom. You said I was an anchor." She leaned in slightly, her voice dropping to a register that was intimate and terrifying. "I hope you know how to swim." She turned her gaze to Jessica. Jessica, usually the most composed woman in any room, looked like a deer caught in the headlights of a semi-truck. She shrank back, clutching her clutch bag as if it were a shield. "And you must be Jessica," Riley said, her voice dripping with a faux sweetness that was more acidic than vinegar. "Thorne and Associates, correct?" "Yes, Mrs. Harrington." Jessica stammered the name, tasting like ash in her mouth. She realized with a jolt of nausea that the power dynamic had just shifted tectonically. "I've been reviewing the Aurora project files," Riley said, raising her voice, just enough for the nearby board members and the press to hear clearly. "Interesting accounting. Very creative. We'll be auditing your firm first thing Monday morning. I'm curious to see where the missing steel budget went." Jessica's knees actually buckled. She had to grab Tom's arm to stay upright, her fingernails digging into his suit jacket. Riley didn't wait for a response. She had delivered the fatal blow, and she had no interest in watching them bleed out. She turned her back on them, the red silk swirling around her legs like a matador's cape. "Sterling," she called out, not looking back. "Yes, Mrs. Harrington." Sterling stepped out of the shadows, a satisfied, predatory smirk on his face. "Get me a drink," Riley commanded, "and have security escort these two out. They're cluttering my ballroom." Before Tom could process what was happening, two massive security guards in black suits materialized. They didn't ask politely. One gripped Tom's arm with a hand the size of a ham. The other grabbed Jessica's elbow. "Right this way, sir," the guard said, dragging Tom backward. "Wait, Riley." Tom shouted, the panic finally breaking through his shock. He struggled against the guard, his shoes slipping on the champagne puddle. "Riley, please, we need to talk. It's all a mistake. I didn't know." Riley didn't even flinch. She didn't turn around. She reached out and took a crystal flute of champagne from a passing waiter's tray. She raised the glass to the room to the board to her new life. She took a sip. The crowd, sensing the shift in the wind, erupted into thunderous applause. They cheered the new Queen of New York, clapping wildly, as the man who had thrown her away was dragged out the side door like common trash, his protests drowned out by the ovation for the woman he had called a nobody. Riley watched the bubbles rise in her glass. The humiliation of Tom Miller was complete. But as the applause washed over her, she knew the night wasn't over. Humiliating him was just the appetizer, destroying the life he thought he had built. That would be the main course. Monday morning did not break over the offices of Thorne and Associates. It crashed down with the weight of a guillotine. The atmosphere on the 16th floor was usually one of frantic, caffeinated ambition. Phones rang, printers hummed, and junior associates scurried about, hoping to be noticed. But at 8:15 a.m., the rhythm of the office was shattered. The elevator doors slid open with a cheerful ding that belied the doom arriving within. They didn't carry clients. They didn't carry contractors. They carried a phalanx of suits, 6 forensic accountants in severe grey wool, flanked by 2 uniformed NYPD officers with hands resting near their belts. Leading them was Arthur Sterling, walking with the unstoppable momentum of a natural disaster. The office went deathly silent. A receptionist dropped her ceramic mug. It shattered the dark coffee, splashing across the beige carpet, but no one moved to clean it up. "Attention!" Sterling's voice boomed, cutting through the open-plan office like a razor. "This is a corporate audit and seizure authorized by the majority shareholder of the Harrington Group. Step away from your workstations immediately. Hands where we can see them. If you touch a keyboard, a mouse, or a shredder, you will be arrested for obstruction of corporate justice." In the corner glass office, the panic was already physical. Jessica Vane was hyperventilating, her manicured fingers fumbling as she tried to shove portable hard drives into her Birkin bag. Tom Miller was pacing the length of the small room, his face a mask of grey, sweaty terror. He looked like a trapped animal. "They can't do this," Tom muttered, loosening his tie as if it were strangling him. "This is insane. It's a hostile takeover. There are laws against this." "It's not a takeover, you idiot!" Jessica hissed her composure, fracturing into jagged pieces. She zipped the bag, her eyes darting to the approaching figures through the glass. "It's an execution. She owns us, Tom. She owns the contract that pays the rent. She owns the building we're standing in, and right now she probably owns the air we're breathing." The door to their office didn't open. It was kicked inward. Arthur Sterling stood in the frame, flanked by the officers. He looked at the two of them with the detached clinical expression of an exterminator discovering a pest infestation. "Miss Vane, Mr. Miller," Sterling said, his voice terrifyingly calm. "You are to accompany me to the spire immediately. Mrs. Harrington wishes to conclude your exit interview personally." Jessica clutched her bag to her chest, her knuckles white. "We're not going anywhere with you. I'll call my lawyer." "You have 2 choices," Sterling countered, checking his watch as if he had a lunch reservation to make. "Option A. You come to the penthouse, sit down, and negotiate a severance that keeps you out of federal prison. Option B. I nod to these officers, and they execute the warrant for grand larceny and embezzlement we filed an hour ago, based on the discrepancies in the Aurora project. He paused, letting the silence suffocate them. I believe cooking the books to the tune of $4 million carries a mandatory minimum sentence of 10 to 15 years. New York state prisons are notoriously drafty this time of year. Tom looked at the handcuffs on the officers' belts. He looked at Jessica, whose defiance was crumbling into trembling fear. I'll go, Tom said quickly, stepping away from Jessica. I didn't know about the shell companies. I'll cooperate. Traitor! Jessica whispered, the venom in her voice, weak and shaking, but she dropped her bag. She followed. The ride to the spire was a study in psychological torture. The Maybach was silent. The tinted windows separated them from the noise of the city, sealing them in a quiet, leather-bound capsule of dread. When they reached the private garage and ascended in the high-speed elevator, the popping of their ears felt like the pressure of the situation physically manifesting. When the doors opened to the penthouse, the atmosphere was starkly different from the gala 2 nights prior. The theatricality was gone. The romance was dead. The room was cold, lit by the harsh, clear light of a winter morning. Riley sat behind the massive mahogany desk that had once belonged to Silas Harrington. She wasn't wearing the red dress. She was armored in a sharp navy blue power suit tailored to within an inch of its life. Her hair was pulled back in a severe, tight bun. She didn't look like a waitress. She didn't look like an ex-wife. She looked like a CEO. She looked like a Harrington. She didn't stand up. She didn't offer them a seat. She didn't even look at them as they entered. She continued to read a file, flipping a page, with a slow, deliberate sound that echoed in the vast room. The preliminary audit is creative, Riley said, finally, her voice devoid of emotion. She tapped a finger on the spreadsheet. It seems Thorne and Associates has been billing the Harrington Group for materials that were never purchased. High-grade tempered structural steel charged to the account, low-grade aluminum installed in the framing. The difference, approximately $4 million, was funneled not into the company accounts, but into a private shell company in the Cayman Islands. She finally looked up. Her eyes were hard, flinty, and absolutely unforgiving. That shell company, JV Holdings, is registered to you, Jessica. Jessica trembled, her legs shaking so badly she had to lean against a chair for support. It was industry standard. She stammered, her voice thin. Everyone does it. We needed the cash flow to manage overhead. It was a temporary allocation of funds. To lease a yacht, Riley interrupted, raising an eyebrow. To buy vintage Cartier bracelets, to steal other people's husbands, is that considered overhead these days? Jessica opened her mouth, but no sound came out. The excuse died in her throat. Here is the deal, Riley said, sliding a single sheet of paper across the polished mahogany. You will sign a full confession admitting to the fraud and the misappropriation of funds. In exchange, I will not press criminal charges. Today. Jessica stared at the paper. And if you sign, you are fired, effective immediately. Furthermore, you are blacklisted. I have already drafted emails to every major real estate firm in New York, London, and Tokyo. If I see your name on a lease, a contract, or even a coffee cup, I will use the full weight of this family's fortune to crush whatever company hired you. Tears streamed down Jessica's face, ruining her perfect makeup. It was a career death sentence. She would be untouchable, a pariah. But the alternative was a cage. With a shaking hand, she picked up the heavy fountain pen and signed her life away. Get out, Riley said, returning her attention to the file. Jessica turned to leave. She didn't look at Tom. She walked out the door, her heels clicking an erratic rhythm on the marble, a broken woman walking into a future of total irrelevance. Now it was just Riley and Tom. The silence stretched for an eternity. The wind howled softly against the glass of the skyscraper 80 stories up. Tom stood there, wringing his hands, shifting his weight. He looked smaller than Riley remembered. The arrogance that had defined him was gone, replaced by a pathetic, oily desperation. "Riley," he began, his voice cracking. He tried to smile, but it looked like a grimace. I don't know what to say." "Don't call me Riley," she said without looking up. "Mrs. Harrington is fine." "Right. Mrs. Harrington." "Look, Riley. Mrs. Harrington. Jessica. She manipulated me. She told me we had to impress the clients, that it was just how business was done at this level. I didn't know about the fraud. You were just what Tom..." Riley stood up slowly. She walked around the desk, closing the distance between them. "You were just trying to sail." Tom flinched as if she had struck him. "I was stupid. I was blind. But we had something, Riley. 5 years. You can't just erase 5 years because you have money now." "I didn't erase it," Riley said, stopping 3 feet from him. "You did. You erased it for a job title and a blonde in a blazer." "I can change," Tom pleaded. He took a step forward, reaching for her hand, his eyes wide with a manic hope. "I see now. I see how strong you are. This power suits you, Riley. We could be a real power couple now. I know the business. I can help you run this empire. We can rule this city together." Riley laughed. It wasn't a happy laugh. It was a dry, humorless sound that chilled the room. "You know the business, Tom. You don't even know the woman standing in front of you. You think I want you back. You think this is me playing hard to get. You think this is a negotiation." She walked to the floor-to-ceiling window, looking out at the sprawling grey grid of Manhattan. "You called me an anchor, Tom. You said I was holding you down. But you had the physics backward. I wasn't the anchor. I was the keel. I was the heavy, unseen weight beneath the surface that kept you upright while you tried to navigate waters you were too weak to handle. And the moment you cut me loose, you didn't speed up. You capsized." She turned back to him, her face impassive. "I bought your debt, Tom." Tom's eyes went wide. "What? Your credit cards, your student loans, the car loan for that SUV, the lease on your new luxury apartment with Jessica. I bought the debt packages from the banks this morning. You currently owe me $140,000. And since you are currently unemployed, I am calling in the loan." I can't pay that," Tom whispered, the blood draining from his face. "I have nothing. I spent my savings on the deposit for the apartment." "Exactly," Riley said coldly. "You are a nobody." She reached into the pocket of her blazer. She pulled out a small, crumpled wad of cash. She walked up to him and stuffed the bills into the breast pocket of his expensive suit. $40, she said. "That's what you left me with on our anniversary. That's what you get. It should cover a bus ticket to, well, anywhere but here." "Riley, please." Tom sobbed, falling to his knees. It was a mirror image of the night he had left her, but the roles were perfectly poetically reversed. He grabbed the hem of her trousers. "Don't do this. I love you. Please." "Security," Riley said, her voice bored. Winston stepped into the room from the shadows. He grabbed Tom by the back of his collar, hoisting him up like a misbehaving child. "Right this way, sir," Winston growled. As he was dragged toward the elevator, kicking and crying, shouting promises and apologies, Riley didn't look away. She watched him go. She watched the last remnant of her old small life disappear behind the steel doors. When the doors clicked shut, a profound silence returned to the penthouse. Arthur Sterling cleared his throat. "Shall I order lunch, Mrs. Harrington?" Riley took a deep breath. For the first time in 5 years, her chest didn't feel tight. She felt light. She felt oxygen filling her lungs. She felt free. "Yes, Arthur." She smiled, a genuine warm smile. "And cancel my afternoon meetings. I want to go to the diner." "The diner, ma'am?" Sterling asked, confused. "The Greasy Spoon." "Yes, I heard the owner, Mike, is struggling with his rent. He's a good man. I think the Harrington Group is looking to buy a new commercial property. I want to give him the deed. He was the only one who gave me a job when I was drowning." Riley walked back to her desk and sat down. She picked up the pen that signed billion-dollar deals, and destroyed the lives of traitors. "And Arthur." "Yes, ma'am." "Send a memo to the board of directors. We're changing the company motto." "To what Mrs. Harrington—" Riley looked at the empty spot on the carpet where Tom had been kneeling only moments ago. "Loyalty is the only currency that matters." Talk about a reality check. Tom Miller wanted a life of luxury and status, but he ended up with a bus ticket and a brutal lesson in karma. Riley didn't just inherit $1 billion. She inherited her self-worth, proving that the person you discard today might be the person holding the keys to your future tomorrow. What do you think, was Riley too harsh, or did Tom get exactly what he deserved? I want to hear your take in the comments below. Type Team Riley if you think she handled business like a boss, or let me know if you think she should have shown mercy. If you enjoyed this story of betrayal and sweet revenge, please smash that like button. It really helps the channel grow, and subscribe with notifications on so you never miss the next saga. Thanks for watching, and remember, be careful who you call an anchor. They might just be the only thing keeping you from drowning.